It's the middle of August, 2020. It's been 3 months since I began this 20 on 20 project and started inviting people to participate, sending me their tapes to share their perspectives with all of us on all the different things they were going through. It began, obviously, dealing with the coronavirus, COVID-19, and the ensuing quarantines, stay-at-home orders, health crisis, societal crisis, political crisis, economic crisis. But towards the end of May, after I'd received a great many of the tapes, we had the Memorial Day weekend, and that was the weekend that George Floyd tragically was killed. In the days after that, as we all know, something else started to take place in 2020. It was a movement with protests and demonstrations that put a focus on social justice in a mainstream way that had never happened before during my lifetime. A lot of people had a lot to say on that subject. I certainly have a lot to say on that subject. But I wanted to make sure that some of the people that had already given their tapes to us to talk about other topics also had an opportunity to discuss this if they wanted to. So this episode is a special episode, a take 2 episode on 20 on 20, in which people have a second chance to talk about the notion of Black Lives Matter, social justice. And it seemed like, as Kamala Harris was nominated to be the first African-American woman to run on a major party ticket, now's a good time to air it. Enjoy.
Black Lives Matter. Very important organization because they just won't stop killing us. And they just won't stop getting away with it. White America needs to wake up and realize that true racism doesn't ride on a horse with a hoodie. There are cops, are politicians, they're in the justice system, they're judges, they're entrepreneurs, they're in every aspect of American life. And they always have been. Please, not to quote Spike Lee, but wake up and understand that there are people out there who don't consider Black people as humans. And it's been generational, it's been passed on from generation to generation since slavery. And people believe what they were raised to believe, for the most part. They don't go outside the box, unfortunately. Some do, most don't. And those people are still around, and they're killing us. Black Lives Matter is a protest, is an organization that is very essential to eradicating this problem. We've had enough. I don't know why we picked George Floyd, or why white folks picked George Floyd, when this has been going on long before George. Why not Tamir Rice? He was a kid. Why not Eric Gardner? I pick him in particular because I am Eric Gardner. Same type. When I go way out for these auditions, out of my comfort zone, out of my bubble, I could get killed like that. I'm a large Black man, so of course you have to be intimidated by me. Even though I've never run afoul in the law whatsoever. Never. Pay my taxes, been married to the same woman for 27 years, but yet I'm a threat. Black Lives Matter. Stop killing us. Let me say it again. Stop killing us.
The first time I remember being called the N-word, I was 3 years old, and I was in a grocery store with my mother. I'm mixed race. My mother's lineage traces back to Ireland, and my father's to Western Africa. A woman approached us, and she asked my mom where she had gotten me from, to which my mother, the ever-vigilant wife of a Southern Baptist minister, replied, "From God. Where else?" The woman said, "No, dear. What adoption agency did you get her from? She sure is a pretty little girl." The last time I was called the N-word was 3 weeks ago in a grocery store by a woman. You know, they say that things don't change until things change. And I sure am happy about a change. I sure am ready for a change. Because we need a change.
So, in talking about Black Lives Matter, given the recent events with George Floyd, I would say before he passed away or was murdered by the police, I did care about Black Lives Matter, but I have to say I didn't fully understand it. And with George Floyd, even though I didn't understand it, I just posted and supported as much as I could until someone said something that really, really helped me understand what Black Lives Matter means. Before, and like many people, I thought Black Lives Matter meant Black Lives Matter more right now. But ultimately, what this person told me, and I think it's important that a lot of people hear this, is that it's not Black Lives Matter more. It's that Black lives should matter as well. And once I heard that, I realized that they're not fighting to stand out. They're fighting to matter at all. And that really hit me. And it made me understand what these protests are for. And going on, hearing that, I've spread it to people that maybe don't get it and have gotten into a lot of social media conversations with friends that beforehand, they didn't consider themselves racist. They didn't consider themselves to not support Black or African American citizens. But their response to a lot of these protests and posts was, well, what about children? Well, what about Latinos? What about Jews? What about these other minorities? They should matter too. Why aren't we protesting with them? And I had a conversation with one particular girl that I knew since theater, college days. And I told her, look, yes, all lives do matter. That's right, which means Black lives should matter as well. And the defunding of the police and the correction and the increase in training for American police officers that goes up can lead to all of these other lives being saved as well, can lead to better situations for everyone. Say you have a domestic dispute, and instead of sending police, which could result in death, you send a social worker, and that social worker who's had way more training, is there solving this domestic dispute, and then sees a kid that's maybe malnourished or getting abused. Well, then there's your kid that you saved, and that cause about children ends up getting fixed because of this Black Lives Matter protest. So not only is it about Black Lives Matter too, it's about making sure that our society can better address the injustices that are going on. And I fully support it. And I hope everyone takes the time to educate themselves and just listens rather than, creating these red herring arguments about what else could matter more or distracting from what's happening right now. So thanks for having me. And Black Lives Matter.
When people ask me how I feel, part of me just wants to let this veneer of civility slip and let the rage, the pain, the grief, the sorrow, the fear just come out in torrents. I am so exhausted from holding myself in a state of grace while all of this is happening. I am so exhausted. I don't sleep. I don't eat. I don't rest. And I have been feeling as a Black woman in America that my life has no value since pretty much the first day I received a racist comment in elementary school. And that has been verified through the events of my life. 25 years ago, a man I loved was shot and killed by the police, shot in the back and killed by the police in Detroit, Michigan, as he was walking up the steps to his mother's house. 25 years of waiting for justice for William Pitts, and that's never happened. So I am not particularly hopeful that Ahmaud or George or Breonna or any of the fallen who have fallen this year are going to get the justice that they deserve. Our American system does not care one iota about the lives of Black people. And that is why Black Lives Matter.
So up until now, people have been really proud of that invented label, white. And that's starting to change in ways that I have never seen. It's like people are starting to read the true history and maybe not feel so proud. 7 or 8 of my white sisters called me up right after the protests started just to say that they were thinking about me. And I could tell that they had really been reflecting. I keep thinking about James Baldwin, who said that what white people need to do is really find out in their own hearts why it was they needed a nigger to begin with. And I agree with that. Like, Black Lives Matter is great. And it needs white men, especially at the top, to self-examine and confront the number one issue, which I think is attachment to power.
And what I see going on in Portland right now and other places in this country is nothing short of Gestapo, brown shirt activity by a burgeoning Nazi regime that's bent on taking over this country. So yeah, I was really disturbed when I saw what was happening up there. It's just unconscionable that that is the United States of America. We have people who are being put into cars that are being taken away with no due process. We have a secret police force operating right now in Portland, Oregon. So, when I was growing up, my mother made us watch the History Channel constantly, and the Third Reich was a topic of discussion most of the time. And this is exactly that situation. This president has got such a long list of criminal culpability that his only hope to avoid that, the statute of limitations, is to take over this country entirely in a dictatorial regime. And if you think it can't happen, it can, and it is. And so what I see happening in Portland, Oregon is just a test case. Supposedly he's going to start doing things in Atlanta and in Chicago, probably be his next stop Tuesday, the shock and awe routine he's going to do on the citizens. And I'm disgusted with what's going on. And I'm as much disgusted with what he's doing as the complacency of the citizens in the United States. Good church-going people who allegedly defend the Constitution are watching it happen and doing nothing. Our job at this point, according to Ben Franklin, is to resist with everything we have.
Imagine you're sitting around the kitchen table with your family and everyone's hungry, so you order a pizza. You call up your favorite pizza parlor and you put an order in for an extra large pizza, because you know that the 18 slices that extra large is going to come with is more than enough to feed your family of 4 and likely give you some extras in case your friends decide to come over to watch the game. And as soon as the pizza arrives, you are dismayed to find out that when you lift the lid on that pizza box, that only one of those 18 slices has a giant, freshly laid, steaming, corny turd right in the middle of that slice. Here's the question. Would you eat the other 17 slices and just throw away the crappy pizza slice that is affected by that turd, or would you call up the pizza parlor and demand that the management do something to fix the situation? It seems like a silly question, but the parallels have an odd relevance with the current environment that we live in right now. Right now, we are in the middle of a brand new movement that is sweeping across the nation. BLM, Black Lives Matter. And in this movement, we have people of color being harassed, targeted, and even killed by members of our community who are sworn to serve and protect. That's a problem. To make the problem even more complicated, there are many people, some with privilege, that are claiming that not all cops are bad cops. It's just a couple bad eggs, but overall, everyone's doing a good job. We hear the phrase "Blue Lives Matter" get bantered around. We hear not all cops are bad. But I challenge that. Is that really the case? To go back to my analogy, if you would not eat an entire pizza of 18 slices just because one slice and only one slice was affected by a corny turd, when you have one bad egg in the police force, doesn't that affect the force overall as far as the eyes of the community is concerned? And before you guys jump in and say, you know what, does it really matter? Yes, it does. Because the police are held to a higher set of standards. They're community servants. You and me, we pay them to serve and protect us, the community. Because they are in a position of power, they are under a higher amount of scrutiny and held to higher standards. They are not above the law, they just serve and protect the law. So, just like our pizza analogy, I'm sure you, as well as me, we would all call the pizza parlor and demand the management fix it. So why are we not demanding our management fix this outstanding problem? Why are we letting a couple turdy slices in our community affect the overall community? We need to call our mayors, call and write our police chiefs, call our senators, write our congressmen, and even write the President of the United States. And together in one voice, we need to say, this is not acceptable. We need change. And those of us with privilege need to speak up and protect those that do not have privilege, because that's a thing. And together we need to find unity. Together we need to stand with each other, arm in arm. We the people, indivisible, one nation under God, where all men are created equal.
Racial injustice isn't something that's new to me or anybody that looks like me. We are in the age of information. So right now is the first time in history that you have so many different people around the world. We were in a global pandemic and everybody was forced to be inside. Businesses were affected because of it. Sports were canceled. You had a lot of distractions eliminated. So it caused a ripple effect of everyone paying attention at the same time, utilizing their smartphones, looking at the internet, looking at social media. And the first time in my lifetime, you had so many people finally waking up and seeing, oh, wow, maybe they're not just exaggerating. Maybe they weren't lying. Maybe they are telling the truth, because we literally see it on camera. We are experiencing the revolution happen right in front of our eyes. So it makes me happy that finally we are starting to touch the surface of getting some type of reparations from being able to work as a collective to dismantle systemic racism as a whole. It's something that runs so deep that it's going to take so much time. But it's important that we all do our parts, on all levels, whether that be protesting, whether that be signing petitions, whether that be bringing it up to legislation, calling out the governments and everybody who has the power to make change. We all have to call them out. It is now June 30th. And Breonna Taylor still has not gotten justice, and her murder happened March 13th of 2020. So we all need to go harder for her as well. And the officers that were responsible need to be charged and arrested. That being said, everybody just speak the truth, spread love, work toward freedom and seek justice. I feel like if we all just do that as a collective, then we can work toward making this world a better place.
Something has got to change. Right. The police brutality, the injustices we've seen, the mistreatment of particularly Black people. I mean, everybody has seen some form of mistreatment. We're not saying that at all. We're not excluding any, but the high rates that we're seeing
are mainly Black lives.
Yeah, something
lives.
has got to change with that.
Right.
And that's what this movement is.
Yep.
Again, we feel like all lives matter. But for all lives to matter, of course, Black lives have to matter. It's not an exclusion. And the saying, this movement, this phrase, it doesn't say only Black lives matter. And if you got offended by Black lives matter, and the first thing that came to your mind, well, my life matters. You probably should do a reality check and check deep down within yourself. Um, there's no reason for anybody to get offended for over Black Lives Matter. Um, again, it's something that's exposing a bigger picture.
Right. And what we stand for is love. And we want everybody to get along. We want everybody to be able to understand that it's okay to have differences. Let's not judge based off our differences. Let's be accepting of the differences. Let's say, hey, this person has a right to make that decision.
Yeah.
They have a right to be who they want to be or who they choose to be. And at the end of the day, we can love them because they are a human being.
Yeah.
And that's just it. And
Yeah.
we all go and use the bathroom. We all eat. We all need
everything.
everything
Air to survive.
We all need. We have the same needs.
Let me say this. Black Lives Matter. There is a substantial growth that has stemmed from this, that will continue to stem from this, because it's not just for Black people; it's for all people. It's been a beautiful thing to see all people coming together, to see people come together like they did after what happened with George Floyd. All colors, all races. The different cultural dances that I've seen in the media, just everybody taking part of, hey, this has got to stop. We've got to shift. We saw corporations donating millions of dollars, things like that. There will be more growth, and that's a beautiful thing that has come from Black Lives Matter.
So we hope you enjoyed this video. We hope that you also understand where we stand when it comes to Black Lives Matter. And we also hope that everyone finds this in love, and everyone, hey, just walks in love at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Be accepted.
Remember, Black Lives Matter, all lives matter.
But the only way for all lives to matter is that Black lives have to matter.
Black Lives Matter goes without saying. If we didn't matter, we wouldn't be so heavily oppressed. Some examples include the obvious killing of our men and women, specifically at a high rate, how the education system is not in favor of African Americans, putting us in bad living conditions and then gentrifying the communities, or how the workforce not only pays us lower wages in comparison to white Americans, but regulates our appearance so closely that my skill set could be ignored if I wear my hair in locks. Regarding the movement specifically, it's passive in comparison to what we're combating. There are positives. Protests and social media are putting things on the forefront, so they can't be ignored, and that is bringing about a big part of the progress and result. Public figures are starting to use their platforms to call for action. Even people outside our community, outside the Black community, are taking action as well. Um, my initial response was, really, y'all late. It's unfortunate, but it's a shame that it took a pandemic and a senseless murder caught on video for some people to see what was happening. But the good thing is that now they do see it, and they choose to take action against it to help bring about a change in result. So while there is progress, there is still a lot to be done. When you turn on the news and check your feed, it's evident that we're still harassed and murdered on the premise of hate. It was only 2 or 3 months ago that 3 brothers were found hanging in trees. Guys, this is 2020. Black Lives Matter is passive in response to all the above. It's very passive in comparison to all the above. It is very passive to combat such a wicked, sick, deep rooted system in America. So, to the people that are triggered by the statement, you need to ask yourselves why you're not more triggered by why it's being stated. Because God forbid the day that someone takes the life of one of your loved ones with no repercussions. You're not going to come back and say all lives matter when their life didn't.
It has been several months since I first recorded a piece for this 20 on 20 project, and I'm honored to be asked to do this again. There's been so much, as you know, that has happened since Memorial Day. And here's a list. I had to Google it because I couldn't remember all that has happened, which has been a lot. Suffice it to say, and you know this, there's been both continued disturbing events, and there's also been some really good things that have happened too. The worst, of course, in Memorial Day begins with George Floyd and the BLM protests and the Confederate statues being torn down and worldwide support of this and other protests around the world. We've had enough. I'm sick of the insanity. I'm sick of the inequality. I'm sick of seeing the news of police brutality, and there needs to be a paradigm shift. And the good news is, there's been already change happening. NASCAR, other corporations that have got on board, and even if it's to save their bottom line, I don't know. It doesn't matter. What matters is that key players are getting behind this, and if we don't, we're doomed. So it's great to see that there is some positive change, including some, the movement as a result of BLM, the defund the police, which I think is a lousy wording of the movement, but the idea of reallocating funds for social programs to help those that are in need is wonderful. Of course, there's been 150,000 deaths. The Portland and the Lafayette incidents, Trump bar gassing the protesters there so he can have a photo op holding up a Bible. That's just disgusting. Portland, the federal troops there, speaking of disgusting and unacceptable, federal troops, unnamed, unidentified, camo-clad federal troops there, with a wall of moms and vets getting smacked around and pepper sprayed. What the hell? I mean, this isn't North Korea, this isn't China, this isn't Russia. That John Lewis passing, which again there's two sides to that. One is sad to see him go. He was such a light for this country. Get a little choked up. But we can focus on the positive, that he held the torch and he led one of the key figures to lead the way towards more inclusion and equality. And we need to take up that mantle. We need to honor him by continuing in his work. And it was wonderful to see the three past presidents, Obama and Clinton and W, up there giving eulogies. So here we are still. We're still in this tumultuous time. There's still a lot of uncertainty. But there is, in the midst of this darkness, there's light. I can only do that which I can do. there's so much that's outside of my control, much to my dismay at times, because I would really like to be able to personally make some change, big change. I'm sure you would too. So yeah, each day get up, try and focus on what I can do, and then do those things. And just to remember that there is light at the end of the tunnel. This is going to end eventually, and we're going to need each other at the end of this. And it's been said countless times, but I'll say it again here. We have more in common than we do have in difference. And so, gosh, I hope that we can find our way back to that mindset. Until then, hang in there. We're going to get through this.
It amazes me how many of my friends and acquaintances I've had this conversation with, and they were on the opposing side. I think I was even more shook when I was speaking to a very close friend, and even that person was on the opposing side of Black Lives Matter, and they're Black. I think I realized then that we're getting to a place where not even my Black brothers and sisters believe that their lives matter enough to protest in the street against being murdered, being mistreated, or just being harassed. Like, you're afraid to protest, you're afraid to speak up, or do you really just don't care anymore? And I say anymore because this conversation isn't new. It's very old. It's older than my grandma, and she's 88. So, for me right now, the only thing that Black Lives Matter movement means for me right now is that we're saying no. We're saying no more will we tolerate your bigotry. No more will we tolerate your hatred. No more will we tolerate your radical racist injustice. Just no more will we take your oppression. No more will we take your murder. None of it. Like, you can keep it all and leave us in peace. And by peace, we just want to live without looking over our shoulder, or without being afraid to go to the grocery store or to the park or to leave our bachelor party or to ride the subway. I mean, the list is unending. It's unending. We can't even sleep in our homes. Breonna Taylor was murdered in her home, and her murderers walk free. You can speak against that. You can have something to oppose against being in your home asleep. I don't want my grandkids to ever have to protest being alive, being able to live in the country that their ancestors built.
This is an excerpt from an essay entitled White People Around the Fire by Alondra Perez. I got home that night and tried to figure out how much of what happened was my fault. I realized my white friends had long ago told me what kind of allies they were, so I had attributed their offensive comments to ignorance and said nothing because, though I was offended, I did not feel implicated. I knew that if I had higher expectations of my white friends, I'd have none. White supremacy guilts Black people for however they choose to survive within its reigns. It mocks Black people for surviving in silence and grace, and condemns them for resisting and fighting. But that fight in my friend's house where I was a guest, where I was outnumbered by white solidarity, was not mine to fight. I was not so much traumatized by my friend's father berating me with offensive language as I was traumatized by my friend's inability to tell him to stop. I had learned to survive fear and discomfort with a smile on my face and my friends had learned to avoid discomfort and confrontation at anyone's expense. The racist things white people say around me are because of and in spite of my blackness. Bringing me into a predominantly white space or home makes white people feel like they've done the work. They get comfortable. They ask racist questions and make racist remarks, assuming that I'll be understanding of their curiosity and slip-ups because they are above reproach. They have, after all, invited one black person into their home, company, or institution. My presence validates them, and in their arrogance they expose themselves. White people hate being told what to do, but they especially hate being told who they are. I know if my friend's father reads this, he will likely talk about how his mother was a Spanish immigrant and how he married an Italian woman. He'll talk about his love for music from all corners of the world. He might even argue that he is a citizen of the world. He might even say he doesn't remember yelling those racist words, and it's likely that he doesn't. He would be offended that I did not recognize the curious intention behind his racist questions. Racism has a way of being swallowed by intention in a uniform blob of goodness. It is not socially acceptable to be silent in this moment, and for that reason, I don't trust everyone who's talking. Too many of you have fallen into the habit of looking at the only black person in the room, hoping that they advocate for themselves so that you don't have to. And a lot of your black friends are like me, held hostage by grace, dangling above the flames, trying to survive the violence.
There's a lot of talk out there from a lot of people, and we talk about policemen and stuff like that. But I can remember my first run-in with the police. I was in the second grade, and I'd gotten beaten up at school. Now, when you're a kid in an elementary school, you're always told, if you're lost, flag down a policeman, or if you feel like you're in danger, flag down a policeman. And when I was a child, I ended up getting beaten up by like 5 gangsters at my school. And I was bruised, I was crying, and I flagged down a police car and I asked them for help. And they looked over and said, "What did you do? You probably deserved it. Now get out of our face." In a car that said protect and serve. And that stuck with me for a long time. And as I got older and started traveling more of Los Angeles, and I have to point out that I live in Los Angeles because we're one of the better cities in the country. The city of Rodney King is one of the best cities in America, and growing up, after that moment in the second grade, I've never felt safe around the police because there I was, bleeding, bruised, and crying, and they did nothing to help. They shooed me away. And as I got older, the attitude became more and more violent. I know when I say staring down the barrel of a police sidearm, I'm not joking. I've had police draw their guns on me over 15 times over the course of my adult life. Just in the 21st century alone, it was more than 9. And when I see what BLM is trying to do to bring awareness and to actually address some of these things, the message warms my heart. The resistance to it does not. Okay? It's really simple. There is no organization called All Lives Matter. There's no alllivesmatter.org out there fighting to end no-knock warrants or fighting to get kids out of cages because they look brown. There's no All Lives Matter out there to stop profiling or even to stop mass shooters. When it comes to Black Lives Mattering, it's a reminder, you know. Now, this country has a long history of not seeing black lives as lives at all. I mean, all the way back when we were first brought over here, we weren't looked at as people. It took us 260 years to be recognized as human, just for it not to be against the law for us to learn how to read. And then of course, the history: Jim Crow, redlining, denial of the GI Bill, closed doors to building equity and education and separate but equal, and ghettos that were built up with no support from the financial sector or the government sector. You know, we've been fighting not just for equality, but for personhood. Not too long ago, there was a government official who publicly went on the record and said the blacks are organizing, so people need to do something. Think about that. The blacks are organizing, so people have to do something.
I have been talking a lot to my son, who is 8 years old and white, about the Black Lives Matter movement. Part of it is easy to explain. I can show him the history of the mistreatment of people of color in America as far back as it goes. I can show him still what's happening today with police brutality and inequality and why there needs to be a movement in the first place. He understands what it means when a sign says Black Lives Matter. He understands I can't breathe and end racism. Those concepts he's got down. What is a little harder to explain is the concept of white privilege and what it means to be a white person in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. So I tell him, in this life, as a white male, you will be given certain privileges, certain passes, certain freedoms, certain nudges forward that other people of color, who you see as equal to you now, will not get. And how unfair that is. And how while they won't feel like advantages at the time, they will feel like advantages when you compare them to other people who are disadvantaged, strictly because of the color of their skin and because people are racist out there in the world. So every single day, I try to instill in him that where you see injustice, you must speak up. When you hear racist jokes, you must shut them down. When you see someone being mistreated for being different in any way than yourself, you have to speak out. That's what it means to be a white male in support of Black Lives Matter. To be an advocate or an ally, both really, wherever you see injustice. I hope everyone is educating their children this way, but I worry that they won't do enough, that they'll say it's enough to just not be racist. It's not enough to not be racist. You have to actively get involved. And that is what we are teaching our son every single day.
I tell you the incident that probably people have different, events that happen. Some people were just utterly destroyed by the Trayvon Martin or Eric Garner incidents, or different ones. Philando Castile. That kind of got certain events and certain tragedies ended up touching different people in that special visceral way. And these have been terrible. And, George Floyd got me. But I tell you, after Rodney King, the one that got me that I think most people have forgotten about, this happened in 98. James Byrd, was taken. They tied his feet to the back of a pickup truck and drug him They drugged that man for 3 miles. The doctors say that he died after them dragging him for 1.5 miles. I want people to get in their car or whatever kind of way you can measure and measure out the distance of a mile. And measure out a distance of another half a mile after that. Now, cognitively put in your brain that after a mile and a half, his head has come off. One of his arms is off. And they still drug him another mile and a half. White men in Texas. That one bothered me. That was the one for me. That one let me know the inhumanity deep down of America.
I know we're here to talk about Black Lives Matter, but if you will allow me, I'd like to go back a little ways, back to the civil rights struggle. The civil rights era spanned about 14 years, and it ended in 1968. And that was a very tumultuous time in America because Black people were literally fighting with their lives for the rights to be seen and heard and treated as equal human beings. It was a very tumultuous time in America because white America, they instituted a reign of terror over Black America. The KKK, they sick dogs on us. They used high-powered hoses. They spat on us. They beat us with batons. And in a lot of cases, killed and lynched Black Americans. Now, if you jump forward 52 years into 2020, and we are in effect still standing in the same place. And you would think that a nation in 52 years would progress. And I mean, as a nation, we have. Think of technology. Think of medically, scientifically, all of the things that we have done in 52 years. But this one struggle seems to not be able to, we can't get over that hurdle. So then you have Black Lives Matter. And it seems crazy to me that in 2020, I have to say Black Lives Matter to anyone. But it was born out of the tragedy that was Trayvon Martin. In 2013, George Zimmerman followed this 14-year-old kid home. I believe he was 14. Essentially stalked him and killed him. And so 3 Black women, whose names were Alicia Garza, Patrice Cullors, and Opal Tometi, they started the Black Lives Matter movement. And it is just that, a movement. Because how can all lives matter if Black lives don't matter in addition to all of those lives? And I believe that here in America, we are effectively being shown that they don't matter. You think of Freddie Gray, you think of Eric Garner, you think of Sandra Bland, Tamir Rice. And I can't even say it's Black men. Our women and children are being killed at a disproportionate rate also. Tamir Rice was just 12 years old, a little boy playing in the park, when a police car pulled up, and within 12 seconds, he was dead. Sandra Bland was pulled over for failing to use her turn signal. And she never left that jail cell. So for me, this is why Black Lives Matter, because I'm a mother of a Black man. And even the thought of that one sentence, I'm the mother of a Black man, makes me know without a shadow of a doubt that Black Lives Matter. Because his life matters to me. As a young mother, I did everything I could to raise him right, to make sure that he did the right things, was polite, that he grew up and stayed away from harm. I kept him out of harm's way until I couldn't. Until he became a threat. Just another Black man. And he was arrested for the first time at 18. He was pulled over right down the street from our house. He had went to Torchy's Tacos to get some chips and salsa and to come over to my house, and because he had a shiny new car which I had bought him for graduation, and he had tinted windows, and they pulled him over. That was one of many times he's been pulled over and arrested. And he's actually been beaten up in police custody. But I thank God that he made it out alive. Because there's so many others who have not. Philando Castile, Alton Sterling, Ahmaud Arbery, and Botham Jean, just like Trayvon, were killed by citizens, and all the rest killed by police. Which again leads me to there's a reign of terror being unleashed on Black Americans. And it's getting to the point where I'm a Black woman and I move freely through this life. But I'm beginning to question, if I leave out of the house, will I return home? And every day my son leaves out of the house, I wake up in a terror, shaking, going, will he come back home? And it's important to me because he's a father now. And that would devastate me because he loves that baby so much. And I can see the change in him. And he wants to be a father. And I want him to be a father. I don't want to have to explain to his daughter if he should get killed by a police officer, what happened. And so I'll leave you with, until Black Lives Matter, in addition to all lives, then you can't use that slogan, all lives matter.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now